From Anshe Sfard Beth El Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to Parshat Vaera, 3 signs, 7 plagues. If we look at last week's Parsha, in the story of the burning bush, the Vayas told Lifneim, Moshe did 3 signs in front of the people to show that God had sent him. He was worried that people would say, who sent you? How do we know? He had 3 signs. What were the signs? The staff turned into a snake and back into a staff. The shchin, the leprosy that he would have on his, the tzaraat, the leprosy he would have on his hand, and it would go away. And the blood, the water turning into blood turning into water. Now, who are these for? So we know that the Vayas told Lifneim, he showed the people who were the object of these plagues, of these signs. They're the ones who doubted Moses. So he showed it to them. Does he show these things to Paro? Well, there's a separate visit where Moshe comes to Paro and he shows him the sign of the snake. He says, God says, if he wants a mofet, if he wants some sort of sign or wonder, show him the staff snake trick. So he comes and he shows him this trick. The necromancers, the magicians, they could do the same thing, so they weren't impressed. That was a separate visit. Also, there's a visit at the beginning where he just comes and says, hey, we want to go on a 3-day tour. We want to bring some sacrifice. And what does he say? Pen yivge'enu b'dever v'chav. Lest he bring us a plague with dever, the pestilence, or a cherev, a sword. Again, Moses is telling Pharaoh that we have to bring we have to go on a 3-day tour. We have to bring offerings to God, lest he plague us. What does he mean by us? The Ibn Ezra says, we need it. We all need it. We're not threatening you, we're threatening ourselves. You see, Rashi thinks that he's softening the blow. He really means, we better go worship, otherwise you, Pharaoh, will be plagued. But he doesn't want to say that. He just met him, or he just re-met him. So he says, lest we get the plague. But he doesn't really mean we, he means you. He means, you better let us go pray, otherwise you're going to get a plague. A sword or pestilence, which is, sword, it's not clear what plague that is, and pestilence is one of the last plagues. So it's interesting that he's warning him at the beginning about the things at the end. However, if you say that he's really warning him that, no, we're all going to be plagued. I'm not threatening you. We all need this. Everybody needs it. We need to go pray because we're all going to die. We're all going to get this plague. So we have to pray for all of us. This sort of softens the blow. It's not Moshe threatening Pharaoh with plagues against him. He's saying there's a general problem and we need to go pray for it. It's almost like Yosef coming to Paro and telling him, you, the country, we have a problem. It's interesting to note that when Moshe spoke to God at the burning bush, he told him, come and tell him you're going on a 3-day tour. But later, right before the story of Moses' child or himself almost being killed, and the bris of his son, Hashem says, look, go to Paro and tell him if you don't, my firstborn child is Israel, and if you don't let them go, I'm going to kill your firstborn. So before any of the plagues start, he tells him, go tell Pharaoh that you better let him go, otherwise we're bringing that last plague. So which one is Moshe supposed to do? Is Moshe supposed to tell him that, hey, we just want to go on a 3-day tour? Is Moshe supposed to tell him, hey, watch out, we're going to kill you with a sword, with pestilence? What's going on? So let's take a look. Firstly, these 3 plagues, the staff trick was a sign. Before there were plagues, there was the first sign. Even though we think of the blood as the first plague, it's actually the second mofet. It's the second trick to show and prove that Moshe is real. Moshe is powerful. God is powerful. But that second trick or plague is also the first of what we call the 10 plagues. It's the blood trick. Now, what about the leprosy trick? Well, either the leprosy trick was just for Moses. As Rashi says, you got leprosy to show anybody who messes with the Jews, anybody who speaks against the Jews, whether it's Moses, who thought the Jews wouldn't listen and wouldn't believe, will be struck with leprosy, or whether it's Pharaoh, who doesn't let the Jews go, he'll be struck with leprosy. And indeed, he was struck with leprosy much later. So maybe he was struck with leprosy. Maybe leprosy is just for Moses and just a sign for the Jews. If we consider the first few plagues as simply, well, give us a sign. Pharaoh asked for it. He asked for these plagues. Like, beat me up. Go ahead. No, he doesn't want to be beaten up. He wants a sign. So the staff with snake's trick was a sign. It turns out the blood was also a sign. It was originally part of the 3 signs. What about the first 3? Dam tzvardei akinim, blood. We said that's part of the signs. The frog and the lice, well, there were supposed to be proofs, but unfortunately, those were the 3 that were not proofs. Ironically, these that were supposed, the blood, which was part of the first 3, which is supposed to be a proof, those 3 things, including the staff, which was not a plague, none of them were proofs. He could make staff turn to a snake too, somehow. And all his people were able to make the blood, the water turn to blood, and they could make frogs come. The only one they couldn't do was kinim, was the lice. That plague they could not do. So in a sense, that triad of the dam tzvardei kinim, the blood, the frogs, and the lice, it's only the last one that is actually successful in proving that which the blood, the leprosy, and the staff were supposed to prove. They didn't prove it. It's only the lice which actually proves it, because the magicians could not do the lice plague. Now, as we said, is Moshe coming to Paro and saying, hey, listen, bud, you better let those Jews go, or else we're going to get you, and we're going to get you with some serious plagues? Well, depends. What did Moshe mean when he said at the very outset, Pen yivge'enu badever v'cher? Was he saying, we're going to get you? I'm going to use the euphemism, we're going to get us, but I mean you, with a sword or with pestilence. Thereby warning him, certainly of this plague of pestilence. We'll see what the sword is in a minute. Or was he saying to him, I'm telling you right now, it's going to be you. You are going to be warned with it. I want to suggest that he was making it, so he softened it up. Moshe didn't have the guts to go to Paro right away, or he thought it wouldn't be a good plan to go to Paro right away and say, God is going to get you. He said, look, God is going to get us. Either meaning us, the Jews. We have a problem. God's going to get us, so we've got to go out and pray. Or God is going to get all of us, so we have to go and pray for you and for everybody, for you all, for everybody. So he starts off kind of light. And in fact, if you look at the simple meaning of the text, without midrashic embellishment, the dam and tzvardei and kinim were for everybody. Everybody had a problem of blood. Everybody had a problem of frogs. Everyone had a problem of lice, including the Jews. It's only when you get to the second set of 3, Arov and Dever, the wild animals, and the pestilence, and there you have the pestilence, that is only for the Egyptians. So he says, look, we might have a plague. And in fact, we had a plague. Everybody had a plague. And then he starts to show him, Mr. Paro, it's not, we're not playing footsie over here. This is going to be against you, not against us. We're trying to save you from you. You're the one who's being plagued because you're the one who's not letting them go. And we're getting a little tougher now. Moshe's getting a little tougher. Basically, you're going to suffer, not us, not all of us. You're going to suffer if you don't let them go. Arov and Dever, only for the Egyptians, not for the Jews. The Shechin, it's not clear. But again, that Shechin was one of the original signs. Barad, Arbe, and Choshech, the hail, the lepers, the grasshoppers, and the darkness, only for the Egyptians. Clear in the text, clear as day, that the Jews did not have any of these plagues. So eventually it goes from we have to go pray for everybody to we have to pray for you, because you are the ones who are going to get the plagues, not us. I'm threatening you, Pharaoh. That's who I'm talking to. Now, what is this cherev? That lest God is going to attack you with the dever. Okay, dever is pestilence. That's one of the plagues. But what is the sword? So I'd like to suggest that when the grasshoppers come, the grasshoppers come as an army. If you look in the book of Yoel, in the first chapter of Joel, you will see that the camp of the grasshoppers is very large. Locusts, if you ever look at a YouTube video of locusts, they attack like an army. They come and they descend like an army of 100,000 people. You can't see 5 feet in front of you. Everything is locust. It's like an army. So that's sort of like the sword. And it reminds us of, sort of plays on Pharaoh's fears. Remember, Pharaoh said, Nilcham banu v'lam en haaretz. They're going to attack us. They'll fight us in a war, and they'll take us out of the country. Well, that's what happens when you have a pestilence like a locust. Basically, you've been conquered by another nation, by the locust, which seems like an army. So maybe that's the cherev. Or more obviously, the cherev is the sword that kills, namely the plague of the firstborn. God is telling Moshe at the very beginning, I'm telling you, there's going to be this terrible plague. Moshe doesn't have the guts, or doesn't think it's a good strategy to right away mention the worst of the plagues. But he says that maybe God will get us with this sword, which is an allusion to that. But he's not telling him that it's really a sword for you, not for us. What we think of as the 10 plagues, they really have a certain transformation. They transform from signs to plagues, from something designed to prove to Pharaoh to something that is simply a sign of punishment, a wonder for the Jews for all eternity, for a punishment against Pharaoh for having a hard heart, that they morph. And what's ironic is that the plagues that were designed to be signs of God's proof of God and all that, those weren't so impressive. The first 3 were not so impressive. It's only the third or fourth, which is the kinim, the lice, which was actually more impressive. It's interesting to note that the plagues were first presented as something that would affect all of them, and in fact, perhaps they did affect all of them, including the Jews. It was a group effort the Jews were making to try to save the Egyptians, and eventually he says, no, we're not saving ourselves, we're only saving you. You're the ones we're saving, and you're the ones we're punishing, and you better let us go, because if not, then we will not suffer, but you will. So there's a moving closer to the target. There is an escalation of the threat against sort of everybody to a threat specifically against the Egyptians. And Moshe is able to get tougher with Pharaoh as time goes on. But from the very beginning, God tells him there is a very serious warning against Pharaoh specifically. So this is how we look at the plagues. There are the 3 signs to prove that God is God, and then there are the 7 plagues, which have a different role, and that are basically a plague against the Egyptians, not for the Jews. As to the question of whether the Jews were plagued with all the plagues or not, that's discussed in a different video. Thank you for joining us at this discussion of Parshat Vaera. Thanks to Jason Lefkowitz, our producer, and join us each week for a discussion of the Parsha and the holidays. Thank you.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit asb.org.